You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. I'm going to just be quite frank with you right off the crack of the bat. This is going to be a bit of an unusual show because there is really one item in the news that needs to be discussed, because I swear to the mother of good sweet Mike, no one watched the 40-minute press conference diplomatic meltdown today that took place in the Oval Office. I did, because I was on Dr. Phil's Merritt Street for like 3 hours today, ended up rolling through it twice. So we're going to do our best to focus through this. If you are not watching over on the live stream, dailysignal.com, you can find the link there, youtube.com/dailysignal. That's where you want to check it out, because the general takeaway from today is that the United States is further than it has been to brokering peace between Russia and Ukraine than it has been for some time. Now, the real point, before we get into anything else, is recognizing this is a negotiation between the United States and Russia. It is, because Ukraine has absolutely no leverage on its own to broker peace with anybody other than surrender. And that is an unfortunate and disturbing truth of the matter. Ukraine is losing this war. And therefore, allies of Ukraine and those in whose interest it is to not see Putin marching into Kiev, those who really would like to see Ukraine remain free, need to understand what the stakes are and what's gone into this. So let's get into this. This week, Trump has been meeting with international leaders throughout the entire week in preparation for a U.S. and Ukraine minerals deal. This U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal would provide a way for the United States to heavily invest in Ukraine's economic future by establishing infrastructural mineral rights and agreements in future sites, not currently existing sites, mainly in oil and uranium, to help pay back the United States for its hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military resources through U.S. financial aid and other means that we've supported the nation against the unwarranted incursion of the Russian military. The international community has gotten behind this deal. Keir Starmer, the left-wing government of the United Kingdom, and France's definitely not on the right, Emmanuel Macron, have both praised Trump this week on the upcoming deal, because they recognize that only the United States has the authority and the ability to broker peace in this region. And that brings us to today. Volodymyr Zelensky arrives at the White House. He's dressed in the exact same thing he's always been wearing, which is this kind of sort of tracksuit, military fighting uniform style thing, even though he's not doing any fighting. He's the head of state. But he shows up to the White House in this, and Trump comments on it immediately because that's Trump's style. Here you go. You're all dressed up. They shake hands. It's very friendly.
He's all dressed up today.
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir?
And then they shake hands and they go into the White House. And there they make what I believe is one of the biggest mistakes. Zelensky has had no problem at all walking around the world in the last couple of years and making demands of world leaders and also doing a lot of showboating. Now, Trump also does a lot of showboating. So is the showboating in and of itself a problem? No, not necessarily. But the problem is that Donald Trump, who likes being in front of the media, and Volodymyr Zelensky, who likes being in front of the media, then sit down in the Oval Office in front of a smaller press pool of media and do their introductory conversation. Now, here's where everyone online and in the media completely goes off the rails. In front of the press, they have a cordial 40-minute chat. Now, the way that you're seeing this framed online and in the left-wing media is that this was some kind of an ambush. Trump and J.D. Vance, they were hiding in the bushes. And they ambushed Zelensky, and they somehow caused him to get all angry, and it was Trump and Vance who wrecked this entire thing that Trump and Vance set up. No, that's not how it was at all. There was 40 minutes of just cordial conversation that began, by the way, with Trump very liberal in his praise of the Ukrainian people and Zelensky himself.
Your soldiers have been unbelievably brave. We've given them great equipment, but somebody has to use the equipment. They've been unbelievably brave, and we give them great credit. This was supposed to be over very quickly, and here we are 3 years later. So
he begins by saying that Putin was supposed to just march right through to Kiev because of the Biden administration's failure in Afghanistan, which egged on the Putin administration, just like under Obama, his false red line, which allowed Russia to, again, create incursions into Crimea in 2014. And Trump praised the Ukrainian people for, with the resources of the United States and Europe, outlasting Putin with minimal loss. And by minimal, I mean minimal territorial loss, like they haven't lost half the country's landmass over 3 years. And then we get into kind of the nitty gritty of the comments. So right away, what Zelensky says in the first 2 minutes is that he will have no concessions to Putin. He will not give up Crimea. He will not give up the Donbass. That was said by Zelensky in the meeting openly because Putin is a killer and a terrorist. Again, understandable that Putin would receive those kind of criticisms from Zelensky, given that Putin invaded the sovereign territory of his country. Now, it gets really, really dicey when Zelensky starts to get a bit antagonistic. About 24 minutes in, Trump says he wants a ceasefire. And Zelensky says, I want security guarantees first. Now, that's not an economic guarantee that they're signing for. They're currently in the process, or at the time, they were in the process of prepping for the minimal rights deal that would give the United States an economic stake in Ukraine. And if you know anything about how the United States has operated since the days of Thomas freaking Jefferson, that is how the United States establishes security protocols overseas. We have an economic stake in the country, whether it's Japan, whether it's South Korea, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Israel, whether it's Western Europe, whether it's Australia, for crying out loud. The United States establishes an economic presence in an area, and then because there are American citizens operating on the ground heavily in that area, it kind of really disinterests foreign predators from moving into the region without having to plop Ramstein 2.0 right next to Russian territory, which, again, whether you believe him or not, is what Putin says is his main aggression towards fighting in Ukraine. So, moving on from that, what does Trump say in the response to Zelensky demanding these security guarantees? Which the way that Zelensky describes the security guarantees means that he wants some type of Article 5 NATO situation, where if Zelensky is ever attacked by anyone at all, then he expects Europe and the United States to be boots on the ground in 6 hours. And Trump brushes this off because that's private diplomatic stuff kind of a conversation. You don't discuss that in front of the media. Oh, and also Putin, who's watching from 6,000 miles away. That's not how you do these kinds of things. But nevertheless, this is Trump's response to Zelensky's security guarantee conversation.
Does that mean provide security guarantees, Mr. President?
I don't want to talk about security yet because I want to get the deal done. You know, you fall into the same trap like everybody else. A million times you said over and over, I want to get the deal done. Security is so easy. That's about 2% of the problem. I'm not worried about security. I'm worried about getting the deal done.
And again, Trump wants the ceasefire. Trump wants the fighting to stop. Trump also understands, and he always does the same kind of deflection, this isn't something to be discussed in front of the media. The entire world has this stupid idea right now that diplomacy needs to take place in front of the press. That's not how diplomacy works. Diplomacy is a style of fighting. Actual diplomatic conversation is a style of giving, taking, compromise, aggression, threats, and promises behind closed doors. And if you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you other than tough. That's how real countries figure out those kinds of problems. That is, unfortunately, how the sausage gets made. Because otherwise, if you lay out all of your terms and exactly what you want and exactly what the red line is, like Obama did in the open, then the opponent knows exactly what not to give you. And if you don't understand how that works, try telling a toddler exactly what you want them to do and then watching what happens. I'm going to give you a bit of a hint. Doesn't go very well. Humans understand how negotiation and diplomacy works. And once you get about 40 minutes in, Zelensky makes one particular statement and everything falls apart. And it becomes a catastrophic mess. We're going to set that up. Those on the radio will catch you in a second. You, of course, can find us over on the live stream. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Okay, how do things start to fall apart? Zelensky makes a particular statement in which, well, a reporter prompts a question and says, Trump, you've said some not really mean things about Putin recently. Does this mean you're on the side of Putin? And Trump answers him, well, rather forthrightly. Check it out.
And now I'm talking with my friends in Poland, and they are worried that you align yourself too much with Putin. What's your message for them?
Well, if I didn't align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal? That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody.
And this really upsets the international community. And to my dying breath, I don't understand why. I don't get it. What a lot of people from the National Review and the establishment Republicans over to a lot of other international leaders want Trump to get out there and say, hey, Putin, here's a middle finger, screw you. He's trying to broker a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. If you go in throwing insults at one party or the other unwarrantedly in front of them, and believe me, we'll get to the dictator comment about Zelensky in a couple of minutes, it will wreck negotiations. And by the way, if you don't like that, scoreboard. This is how the Abraham Accords were accomplished. This is how certain tensions between the U.S. and China were lessened during Trump's first administration. That's how these kinds of policies go. And then everything just goes to snot because during this negotiation process, which Zelensky disagrees with, you have J.D. Vance ask a question and things just go to the rafters.
The world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. Rhetoric. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question. Yeah, please.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
All right, so we admit that at this point, everything has been cordial. There's been a slight moment of awkwardness. We're talking about whose side who is on. Now Zelensky throws a question at the Vice President of the United States. Up until this point, there have been about 40 minutes of conversation in which Trump praised Ukraine, said, look, it's a real world. I'm on the side of Europe and the world. I'm trying to broker peace between the United States and between Ukraine. I know Zelensky, he's coming. He's asked for these security guarantees. We're trying at first to get a ceasefire. After we have an economic stake in the region in which it is worthwhile to defend Ukraine from an economic standpoint, which doesn't switch between administrations. That means once there's an economic anchor in the region, the United States is locked in for decades. That's how that works. See Taiwan right now. Trump understands this. That's what he's brokering for. Up until this point, the conversation has been expressly cordial. Things have been fine. And then everything just goes off the rail because of this question that Zelensky throws to JD. And we're going to bring the radio crew back in for this. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. We'll just bring them right back in. Don't go anywhere.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
I'm talking with my friends in Poland, and they are worried that you...
All right. We've talked a little bit about some of the situations so far between Trump and between Zelensky and the Vice President J.D. Vance today. When things really started to break down was Zelensky pitching a question to the Vice President of the United States. Here you go.
So, do you
way of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact line?
2015.
2014.
2014 is
2014?
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but,
That's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire, all of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract, yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire.
So Zelensky starts making the case to the vice president. Again, he said, I'm asking you a question. And then he starts laying out the history of in the last 10 years. He says Putin's untrustworthy. He's broken ceasefires. He's broken agreements. And therefore, he says Putin cannot be trusted. So we'll try to get to the response here from the vice president. Here's where the question comes in.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
So he says at the end of all of this untrustworthiness of Putin, what do you mean you want to be diplomatic? You know, what do you mean you want to have diplomacy in this particular situation, as opposed to, as the vice president framed it, chest thumping like the Biden administration and the Obama administration is. Remember, former President Biden, when he was in office, he just said don't over and over and over again. He said don't to Hamas. He said don't to Iran. He said don't to the Houthis. He said don't to Putin. And so what Zelensky is suggesting is, what do you mean diplomacy with Putin? Here you go.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems.
A little bit of a pause. Vice President Vance says, hey, I don't really care for this. You are now suggesting that our strategy of the economic diplomatic route to ending this war is not good and it's not trustworthy. You want security guarantees. You want the United States military in, the European military in. You're petitioning to be a part of NATO. First of all, are you really coming into the Oval Office, the president's office, the fireplace across from the president's desk, and now you're going to start litigating this in front of the American media, again, who is watching and filming this, because, we have the cameras right here filming this. And he's like, you're not exactly in a position to be making demands for military establishment in Ukraine after taking all of this money for the last couple of years, and then coming in here and making demands and questioning the United States wanting to end this on a diplomatic route instead of Biden not doing any kind of conversation with the Kremlin at all.
You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to...
So he says, Zelensky says, well, how do you even know what we're going through? What, have you been to Ukraine? And Vice President Vance responds, I haven't been to Ukraine. I've seen the reports. The United States, I know this might sound shocking to believe, every camera of the world has been turned on Ukraine and Russia for the last couple of years. We know exactly what's going on inside Ukraine on the war front. Ukraine has gone through all of its troops, and conscripts are trying to flee the country.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems
What?
Bringing people into your military?
We have
and do you think that it's
I will
respectful
answer.
to come to the Oval Office of the United
answer.
States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all,
This should be done behind closed doors. And the reason that Vance has responded this way is Zelensky has now thrown insults at the vice president, saying, well, how do you even know what's going on? How dare you ask about our military right now? Zelensky is the one making demands of the United States, demanding security guarantees and all of these other things that he wants on his plate before the United States will broker peace with Russia and Ukraine. And Zelensky is making the, and JD is saying, dude, you're not in a place to make demands at all. You're asking us to broker peace for you because you don't have the strength to do it on your own. And instead, Zelensky says, well, how do you know what's going on in Ukraine? How can you say what we can and can't do? And now we're going to get into the complete derailment portion of the negotiations in front of the American media.
during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
Wild statement from Zelensky. Wild statement. So he says everyone has problems in the beginning. I mean, come on, even you had problems in the beginning. I'm sorry. What problems did the United States have at the beginning of the Russo-Ukrainian war? And then suggesting that we will be feeling Russia breathing down our back very soon is just categorically false. He says, you have this nice big ocean, but that's not going to keep you from Russia. Excuse me? Par quoi, senor?
God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right.
You're going to feel influence. It's unclear what Zelensky means here. So again, Zelensky did try to tell the United States how they were going to feel. Here's the problem. Here's the entire issue with regard to Volodymyr Zelensky and the Trump administration. The Volodymyr Zelensky administration has spent the last couple of years running around the world making demands for support because it is in the Western Europeans and the United States' interest that Russia not control Ukraine. And so because of that geopolitical interest, the Ukrainian administration, who again, understandably fighting off unwarranted aggression from the Russians, has used that as a lever against the compassion of the world to demand money and resources and the military support of the rest of the world. And then after losing the war 3 years later, again, it's a lost war. Russia throws men into the meat grinder. That is what it is known for. That after 200,000 Russian dead and things are still going forward for the Russians, albeit slowly, that Zelensky now is ready to come to terms of peace and then comes to the Oval Office and starts making demands of the United States and says, you're going to be feeling influence. What does he mean? He either means, number one, you're going to feel the influence of Russia, or number two, you're going to feel the influence of the rest of the world leaders I'm currently showboating in front of. What he miscalculated on is that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump do not give the flip of a wooden nickel what the rest of the world leaders think, nor do the majority of Americans. We'll send the radio crew over to commercial break for a little bit, catch the rest of the fallout here. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, things get really bent out of shape here, and we see things, if they weren't falling apart before, it gets real dicey.
Now, not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm
You're
serious,
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives of
Elmore.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What do
III.
you think
You're
about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III.
So we now get into the shouting portion of the section. Well, the speaking over another. So Trump uses an American idiom. You don't have any cards at the table. This is a negotiation, right? You are playing a complicated game. I'm sorry, that may not be the terminology you like. It's the truth. Whether because the Ukrainian does not know the idiom, the expression, or he doesn't like the expression, says, I'm not playing cards, Mr. President. And now Trump starts lecturing him You are screwing around here demanding that Europe and the United States put military in action against Russia, which could cause the Russians to use tactical nuclear devices and lead to World War III. And that is the truth. Again, do I think that Putin wants to use tactical nukes? No, I don't. But if you start throwing the Western militaries against Russia, causing Russia to bring China into the fray as well, that's going to cause some serious problems.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
With
back
all
to
respect to
you.
you,
Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
Even
entire
today.
meeting, you said thank you.
Even today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks.
You haven't.
That's okay. Couple of things. So they start getting in a conversation, about, well, I'm talking loud, you're talking loud. This is why you do this behind closed doors. When Zelensky wanted to do this in front of the country by asking questions to Vance and pressuring for things that were not about the deal, basically he was starting a diplomatic negotiation outside in front of the media instead of behind closed doors. He opened himself up to this. This is where Zelensky goofed. Every other world leader, from Keir Starmer to Emmanuel Macron, left-wing leaders who have no problem going toe-to-toe with Trump on the international stage, were both at the White House this week with very successful meetings with the President of the United States, the King of Jordan, who does not want Palestinian people in his country because it would topple the country. Trump said that he wanted the King of Jordan to take in Palestinian refugees into his country this last week. And the King of Jordan diplomatically sat there and didn't get into a fricassee in front of the media. But here we are. Zelensky goofed, and now he has to pay the tab. Because now Zelensky's going to start using the rhetoric he's used in the international media around the world. Like, we were alone at the beginning. No, you weren't. The Trump administration had supplied Javelin missiles to Ukraine so that Ukraine could stop the Russian advance. That's not something that Biden did, but by the time that Biden was in Biden's administration was in full swing, then we actually started to see the Trump administration and into the Biden administration already years into providing aid to Ukraine. They were never alone. Get out of here. Half of our congressmen have Ukrainian flags in their bio. No one shuts up about Ukraine. And so it continues to desist and desist. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse until finally Trump finishes off by saying, look, maybe we shouldn't have done this in front. I'm sure it makes for good TV. We're done with this for now until you're ready to come talk a little bit about peace. We're going to get into that and the reaction to this, as well as the future statements of Zelensky and President Trump in a second. We have to bring the radio crew back in with us, though, so don't go anywhere. It'll just be a few seconds. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So afterward, things were a little bit hairier than perhaps they were supposed to be. Later that day, there was supposed to be the actual behind closed doors meeting. And then there was supposed to be a lunch. And then the East Room was all decorated for the signing of this mineral agreement, the economic stake that America would then use to leverage the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And that's not what happened. So Zelensky, again, starts suggesting that they were going to fight on till the end, and that, they really didn't need anybody. And basically this "I'm a strong woman, hear me roar" kind of stuff. And then President Donald Trump, it is rumored, asked him to leave the White House. It's not clear whether Zelensky left on his own or whether President Trump asked him to leave. But Zelensky got in the car and drove away. And the entire afternoon festivities were canceled. Zelensky did stick around in D.C. for an interview with Fox News' Bret Baier. But beforehand, Trump spoke on the White House lawn about the fallout from that particular interview.
We had a meeting today, as you know, with President Zelensky, and I would say it didn't work out exactly great from his standpoint. I think he very much overplayed his hand. We're looking for peace. We're not looking for somebody that's going to sign up a strong power and then not make peace because they feel emboldened, and that's what I saw happening. I'm looking for peace. We're not looking to go into a 10-year war and play games. We want peace. And it was just my impression that if we do that, if we sign up, he's looking for something that I'm not looking for. He's looking to go on and fight. We're looking to end the death. 2,000 people died this week. Soldiers, more than that, but 2,000 approximately people died this week. Young Ukrainians and Russians.
So Trump also on Truth Social made the statement that he didn't believe President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, said President Trump, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. "I don't want advantage. I want peace," said the president. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. Again, the reason that the Trump administration, that Vice President J.D. Vance, that Donald Trump were so frustrated, and the American government as a whole, as we'll see a little bit later, are so aggravated with Zelensky, is to come into the United States Oval Office and then in front of the American media make demands of the President of the United States lacks a certain decorum, sure, but at the certain position that Ukraine is in, put the citizens of Ukraine at incredible risk. Because if the United States pulls out now, there may not be a Ukraine. The rest of the support of Europe is not enough to keep out the Russian military. And so Zelensky's ego was really on the line. So then he was set to be interviewed by Bret Baier over at Fox. And this was the moment that we were going to see. This is the question I had posed when I was in my coverage during the events today. If Zelensky walks this back, swallows his ego, and instead of barging in to the Oval Office like Greta Thunberg and going, "You have stolen our dreams," and demanding things of Trump, if he swallowed his ego and just accepted the mineral deal and said, "Hey, we all get hot-headed sometimes." I mean, the dude's Eastern European. I mean, every single argument with an Eastern European gets that loud. I'd love to hear what stereotypes I'm participating in on that one. But anywho, the interview with Bret Baier did not go very well. Let's get right to it. Bret Baier and Volodymyr Zelensky.
In the Oval Office. Do you think you did, and do you think you owe an apology to President Trump?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your invitation for this dialogue, and good evening to all your country, to all Americans. I'm very thankful to Americans for all your support. You did a lot. I'm thankful to President Trump and to Congress bipartisan support. And I was always very thankful from all our people. You helped us a lot from the very beginning during 3 years of full-scale invasion. You helped us to survive. Anyway, we are strategic partners. And even in such tough dialogue, and I think we have to be very honest. And we have to be very direct to understand each other, because it's very, for us, very necessary to President Trump. And I'm with all respect that he wants to finish this war, but nobody wants to finish more than we, because we in Ukraine, we are in this war, we are in this battle, and battle for freedom, for our lives. So I'm just telling that I think that we have to be on the same side, and I hope that the president on our side together with us, and that is very important to stop Putin. And I heard from President Trump a lot of times that he will stop the war, and I hope he will, and we need to pressure him with Europe, with all the partners. And I think this dialogue had to be a little bit earlier to understand where we are.
So what Zelensky avoids the question, doesn't say whether or not he's going to apologize, and then he says, actually, it was really good that we had this big explosive moment in the Oval Office today, which shows that Zelensky has no understanding at all of Donald Trump, which is incredible, again, because left and right-leaning leaders around the world have a pretty good understanding of the type of brash individual that Trump is. And so when Zelensky chose to make it a spectacle, instead of going through the agreement, that is on him. That is on him. Whether or not you or I particularly like that, that is, in fact, what happened. And we'll catch some of these clips in just a second. By the way, this is not just those on the populist right of the United States saying this. Even CNN's Jake Tapper and many on the left are now coming around to the conclusion it was Zelensky who completely botched this today. Jake Tapper, from the notably not on the right CNN, quoted today, one pro-Ukraine expert normally supportive of Zelensky offered me this perspective. And this is what he said. Ukraine is losing the war. The expert says, Russia is making tens of thousands of drones per month. Ukraine cannot shoot them all down. Russia is making advances because Russia doesn't value human life and is okay to lose thousands of men a day. That is correct, objectively. Ukraine cannot keep up with that and should not. There needs to be an end to this war, and there are only 3 ways out. This is the realism part that no one seems to want to grapple with. Everyone wants to picture this like amazing patriot moment where like they run out and the ghost of Kyiv is flying over, shooting all of the Russian planes down, and Ukraine takes all of the territory back, and it's wonderful and beautiful, and everything's fine, and Putin is arrested by the international court, and yay, it's amazing. That's not going to happen. That's not in the real life that you're dealing with. So, number 1, America can send military weapons and manpower, and potentially this starts World War III. Correct. Number 2, Ukraine can surrender and give in to Putin. Or 3, we give this ceasefire plan and deal that Trump is pushing a chance. I would go for option 3. Trump was talking about Ukraine getting land back that it has lost just yesterday. Zelensky knew the position of the Trump administration ahead of time. Perhaps this meeting was a trap, but it's one Zelensky could have avoided. So let's talk about that idea of a trap. Again, that's posted by an expert that is a contributor to Jake Tapper and CNN. From the establishment right, there's a lot of pearl clutching from the NRO that Trump is playing to Putin's tune. And this is always the criticism of those on the establishment right and those on the left whenever you say anything about the realism of the situation in Ukraine. That if you say, look, Zelensky doesn't really need, as a leader of a country, to be running around demanding things of people. That's not how you do it. If you point that out and this crew immediately runs to you and starts shouting, well, you just like Putin. You just like Russia. You're just a dictator simp for Putin. Okay. Fantastic. First of all, that's a false binary. Number 2, that's not how grown-ups view the world. And number 3, that's not convincing Americans to support the fight of Ukraine against Russia. It makes you look like toddlers. So on the other side of the establishment right, individuals like Mark Thiessen, who is a very huge supporter of Ukraine, he is with AEI, Fox News, and has written for the Washington Post, said, the entire events of today are entirely Zelensky's fault. Trump greeted him graciously and was ready to turn the page. Just as he said he wanted to get Ukraine's help get its territory back, but Zelensky comes in and gets into a fight in public. Never seen anything like it in my life. Zelensky did, in fact, pick a fight with Trump. And whether or not you like Zelensky or you dislike Trump, that doesn't change the objective facts of what happened today. There's this silly concept that I've seen pasted all over the internet that, it was an ambush, that Trump and J.D. Vance, they were waiting there for him. They were going to get him. They're going to get him. 40 minutes of very pro-Ukrainian dialogue in which Trump offered extra stuff to Ukraine, like trying very hard to broker that Ukraine gets as much of its land back as possible, including the land that has a lot of the minerals that the United States wants in that deal, which are in the Donbass and Crimea. And Zelensky goes, no, I'm not going to compromise with Putin. Well, then what are we supposed to do here? You're out here telling the media and telling Putin that you're not going to compromise, you're going to fight on to the bitter end. So then are the United States just in that forever because the president of Zelensky says, my people are going to keep fighting? Why is the American public, the Western European public, now signing on for this war for eternity because you won't negotiate. Does that mean I like the outset and the outset of the negotiations? Absolutely not. But that is a realistic question that everyone has to confront. And if you don't like it, tough. There's all kinds of wars that are extremely difficult to get out of. You are choosing between the lesser of two evils. That's how the adult word functions. We'll see the radio crew in a second. This is the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. The rest of the interview with Brett Baier was not a whole lot better. Zelensky is doubling down, not backing down at all. And by the way, there are now members of the Ukrainian parliament which are calling for Zelensky to be impeached. Again, we'll get to that in just a second. But here's Zelensky doubling down and saying, I'm not going to do anything until we get military security guarantees.
Just with our people that America stay with us, that's great. We count on it. But just to share it and to say it, that's all.
How does the war end? How do you get to a deal? You're at a place right now where there is no deal. How do you get it back on track?
I think that Europe is ready for contingents and to help us with financing of big army, such big as we have now. This is our army, the part of security guarantees. Now we want to find the place for our biggest strategic partner, for the United States, or United States will propose where and how the United States will give us security guarantees, what kind of and what part of volume of security guarantees.
So what he wants specifically, and he goes on to say that he will not negotiate at all unless there are security guarantees. He wants European and American boots on the ground and military personnel from NATO in the Ukraine, or he wants an Article 5 style situation, in which case if Ukraine is ever attacked, then the Western powers come in and fight on behalf of Ukraine. And the case that Trump is making is, we're not even going to talk about any of that until I can show the American people how they have a vested economic interest in this region. Just saying that you don't want Putin in Kiev is not enough. It's not enough. You have to provide something to the rest of the world. Now, as someone with libertarian sympathies, I absolutely understand the idea of defending your nation from an external threat invading sovereign territory. Absolutely. That is your moral right to fight. That is not my moral obligation to fight for you. There's this silly idea that just because the United States is big, that makes the rest of the world our problem and every conflict in it. That's not the case. It's not the case. Do I want Putin controlling Kiev? No. Should the United States provide enough support so that doesn't happen? To an honorable end, yes. But does the United States, is the red line that we're going to do anything at all to stop Putin from doing anything ever? Because that gives Putin an extreme amount of leverage. And we're all the way back to nuke versus nuke Cold War style tactics, which is not where the world wants to return to. Now, Zelensky did end by saying that the relationship could, of course, be, salvaged. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, it's amazing. No. No, the idea that the Zelensky is just going to get off scot-free from this because this is how he's been operating the entire 3 years. Trump is now, and I mean this in real time, he is now in the process of saying, and I'm paraphrasing this because I don't have the clip here, I don't have the quote here exactly, that the United States, if Zelensky's not going to play, if he's not actually going to show up to the table, because again, the United States is the only power that can broker peace here. I will repeat that. The United States is the only government, it is the only power that can broker peace between Russia and any other country, period. We think Sweden's going to do it? Poland? All of Europe together could not broker peace between Russia and Ukraine can't do it, so it has to be us. So Trump says, well, then you're going to have to give something to the United States, because this is going to damage international relations. This is costing the United States political, economic, and military capital to do this. More than it's already cost the Americans. So, what are you going to propose? And Trump says, look, if you're not willing to play that game, fine. Maybe we just, and this is Trump's negotiation style, maybe we'll just take our hands off. We'll see what happens then, big man. Fine. You will tell the whole world that you're alone? Fine. Show us what you're all about then. And all of the European leaders and the other leaders saying, we stand with Ukraine. Fine, you send boots then. Go ahead, you send troops. You send your big socialized healthcare budget to Ukraine then if you're so smart. If you truly believe that the time is to grandstand and show everyone how beautiful and amazing you are, then go ahead. And that's what Trump is currently doing. So over from producer Daniel, I'm going to see some of the things that Trump has ordered here. The Trump administration is in the process of terminating funding for supporting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. This is according to a source with the Washington Post. The Trump administration currently has no more plans to announce more assistance to Ukraine, but aid is still flowing. We're going to catch the radio crew here. This is the Tony Kinnett cast on the Daily Signal. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett cast.
All right, crew. The radio folks will join us in just a second. Sorry for some of the abrupt pauses and things this evening. Trying to keep the radio crew in with the FCC regulations is a bit of a struggle here, there, and everywhere. Now, I know that the mail time jingle did, in fact, just play, but we're going to go ahead and bring the radio crew in and just try to roll out the rest of the quick news. Again, I know it's an unorthodox show this evening, but it's crucial that we get this entire conversation framed out because the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict, foreign policy in the United States changed today. It changed. It is completely different. And because it's completely different, we need to take a look at how things are moving, where things are going. So the online reaction to things, as you might possibly expect, is something truly, truly special. Now, while the ambush line is still making its rounds, there are individuals who are very on the left, very pro-Ukraine, again, just in that situation, where they've pointed out since the coverage of the Ukraine event today, since the coverage of the Ukraine American, the Trump and Zelensky press conference today, the beginning of that, there have, after the whole narrative about the ambush, now you get to a position where basically the entire world is starting to go, wait a minute, there was 40 minutes of calm conversation. What is Zelensky doing? One individual, Richard Hanania, he's the president of the Center for the Study of Partnership and Ideology, an individual over from the Columbia SIPA. He points out that after watching the entire thing again, and again, these are major individuals in kind of the center and on the left here, foreign policy experts, you might say. After watching the entire thing twice, Zelensky, they say, was minutes away from being home free, would have had the deal, would have had new commitments. He would have been right there, ready to go, getting the peace negotiations started. Probably Trump would have pushed to have him invited to the table. And what happened instead? Zelensky poked at J.D. Vance, said, well, you haven't even been to Ukraine. How dare you say how the war is going on our end? And it all fell to crap. Now what were you seeing from the government and other individuals? Well, you're seeing people like Senator Lindsey Graham, who's normally quite the war hawk, now suggesting that, well, I think that Volodymyr Zelensky needs to either step down or be replaced with someone different before we can proceed with these negotiations. For Lindsey Graham, that's quite a statement. Dan Crenshaw, also a kind of a guy on the right that functions as more establishment from time to time, is also sided with the president. The Democrats are saying the same kind of thing that you would expect them. They're trying to have a field day with this. It is not going to work in the way that they expect. So Congressman Jasmine Crockett, our favorite congressional crackhead who spends more time ranting about white people than doing her job. I'm just kidding. She never does her job. She said Trump and Vance were an embarrassment and a disgrace. She typed them in all caps, so you know she's serious. It is absolutely shameful to watch them berate the president of another country, let alone one of our allies. You're going to hear this time and time and time again. How could he talk this way to one of our allies? You don't hear any of those in the Democrat House or the Senate saying, hey, how did one of our allies treat the president of the United States in his own Oval Office? You're not hearing any of that, are you? What you're hearing is that, oh, Donald Trump didn't let Zelensky make a lot of demands in the Oval Office today, and J.D. Vance didn't sit there quietly while, after asking a question, hey, are you having trouble conscripting troops? Since you want to, air everything out, let me ask a diplomatic question that would have been behind closed doors, now in front of everybody. Are you having trouble conscripting troops? You struggling? And then Zelensky loses it. And then the sound of yelling, angry, like chimpanzees yelling at each other in front of the fireplace starts going off. And it becomes an absolute mess. So we will stick around for some bonus tonus this evening because we're going to see the rest of this through. And we might even get around to the last little bit of news regarding Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Epstein files and all that mess. So to the radio crew, head over to the live stream, youtube.com/Daily Signal, or over on X. We'll see you real soon. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. I didn't even get to make my announcement to the radio crew. That's a real shame. We'll have to hit that later. This is a little more important. Other representatives have said similar nonsensical things. Representative Eric Swalwell, most known for being seduced by a Chinese spy, said absolute admiration for President Zelensky. This guy has balls. He went into the Oval Office and stood up to Russia's best negotiators. Keep trying this. Keep trying this. The idea that if you ever try to negotiate anything, if you ever question what leverage Ukraine has, if you're not willing to just completely, unrestrictedly throw America into eternal support for this war, which, by the way, does result in a lot of Ukrainian dead, it's completely unnecessary, that actually makes it more difficult for future security guarantees of Ukraine and other Eastern European countries. Oh, he's just negotiating on behalf of Putin. I will remind you for the 18th time that the President of the United States is currently in the process of organizing sanctions as well as tariffs on the Russian fuel economy that not only provides a lot of money to natural gas exporters from the United States, but keeps Europe, who is currently buying oil and natural gas from Russia, who they hate so much, it provides Europe an off-ramp to buy from the US instead of with Russia, which very, very severely harms the Russian economy. That's Trump. That's not something Biden was willing to do, by the way, boys and girls. He was cutting the United States exports in oil and natural gas. But lest we get called away, again, we have Cory Booker, who is really getting back to his roots of just crying in front of the public. So it's really good to see him getting out the tear works again. He goes, "We are Americans. We are the most powerful nation on the planet. What defines us is not our power to dominate the weak. What demonstrates our character is not the capacity to traumatize the afflicted. What speaks our truth is not how we taunt, deride, or belittle the embattled, broken, or battered. We are the country of the Marshall Plan, the nation of the Berlin airlift, the nation whose leaders said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Okay. The United States, in exchange for the huge amount of money given to Europe amidst the Marshall Plan, in exchange for the massive amount of resources given to the Eastern German people living in Berlin, the western half of Berlin under the liberation of the Western forces through the Berlin airlift, those were given in exchange for United States, American hegemony on the world stage. That it was because of the Marshall Plan that when England and France decided to play it solo and go screw around with Egypt during the Suez Canal crisis, royally screwing it up, Eisenhower reminded them that we could cut off aid at any moment. Is that hurting the weak, France and England, who are recovering from the Second World War? Or when Austria decided to play it loosey-goosey and maybe consider giving communists a greater portion of their government during the Cold War? Remember when we threatened to cut off the Marshall Plan then? The United States, the entire reason that USAID was set up was so that the president of the United States would be able to play hardball with other countries on foreign policy. Playing hardball is not just throwing a middle finger to Ukraine no matter what the situation, or excuse me, throwing a middle finger to Putin or Ukraine no matter what the situation is. That's not playing. To play the game of diplomacy, you must engage in compromise, in bribery, in leveraging economic, social, military maneuvers. And if you refrain from doing this because you're too good, or the ideal of America in one's heart is too important, like you have Cory Booker whining about here, is not how the real world works. Tammy Duckworth in the same way, attacking our Democratic partner in service of an autocratic dictator. There are so many people today who are suggesting that Donald Trump not letting Zelensky berate him in the Oval Office was a gift to Vladimir Putin. A gift to Vladimir Putin would have been the Biden-esque manner of being lectured by other countries, or like Barack Obama, and then apologizing for the United States on the world stage. Oh, now Putin has all of this leverage. Putin does have additional leverage after today. Absolutely he does. And that's not because of Donald Trump. The United States is the only entity that can broker peace between the United States and Ukraine. Pretend otherwise is absolutely ridiculous. Bernie Sanders, Trump berates Zelensky, the leader of a democratic country, courageously fighting Russian imperialism, while he allies himself with Putin, a dictator who started the bloodiest European war in 80 years. By the way, I really do enjoy Bernie Sanders criticizing Trump over Zelensky, given that when it comes to taking money from corrupt governments, Bernie Sanders has been in favor of serving autocratic dictatorships through United States foreign policy his entire career in government. I'm not going to be taking foreign policy advice from the man who honeymooned in Moscow. Governor Josh Shapiro was also really grumpy. He decided to say this was actually about supporting the 150,000 Ukrainian American people in Ukraine. Again, which one of the barbs that Vice President J.D. Vance threw during the meeting was that Zelensky came to the United States and toured munitions factories in Pennsylvania on the campaign trail with Governor Josh Shapiro. Again, Zelensky knows all of this about Trump, or should. The rest of the world knows this about Trump. That he is very direct, he's very forthcoming, and he cares a whole lot about how things are conducted in public. And if Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron can come forward and make it extremely clear what it is that they want, but still playing nice with the president in front of the American public, if they can't figure that out, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. If that is not something that one can wrap their mind around. Now, where are things going from here? Because unfortunately, things are starting to pick up. I'm not going to tell you about all of the various individuals who are coming out in their governments and saying, we stand with Ukraine. And I know Iceland is a major foreign policy player. I will point out that the Daily Signal did report this evening, according to Bradley Devlin, that the White House found this completely unexpected today. That the deal was set. The rest of the world was ready. Again, Volodymyr Zelensky came ready to sign today. The Ukrainian parliament was very taken aback by this today. That it was expected Ukraine was going to come in, was going to sign the deal, and that peace negotiations, there are rumors that there were meetings being set up in the offing with Russia and Ukraine in the same place. The delegations were being prepared. We were going to go right into the peace negotiations. And then Zelensky sideballed the entire world today by demanding a bunch of stuff in the Oval Office in front of the media, not during negotiations, but by moving private negotiations into the public. So as far as letting the Ukrainian people down today, Volodymyr Zelensky is at the very top of the list. He can pretend that he's really fighting for Ukraine. Screwing over the largest ally you have, who is the only entity that can broker the end of the war, is not a great diplomatic move. So, those things all said, we'll get into just a little bit of mail time here and a little bit of final news before we close off for the weekend. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the former bartender turned Democratic representative from New York, has now formally inquired through a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi whether or not she's under investigation because she has given a lot of advice over the last couple of months to illegal immigrants on how to avoid immigration customs enforcement. Now, advising someone how to break the law, encouraging someone to break the law, that's a federal crime. I can't say, hey, you know what you should do? You should violate federal law. That's not allowed. And then explaining to them how to do it is aiding the crime. Now, it's really funny to see someone writing a letter saying, am I officially under investigation or just kind of, sort of? This letter is dated yesterday. She writes, I write to request clarity on whether the DOJ has yielded to political pressure and attempts to weaponize the agency against elected officials whose speech they disagree with. Yielding to political pressure and attempts to weaponize the agency. I fail to see how it is not the weaponization of your platform as a representative of the House of Representatives in the United States Congress to tell people how to evade U.S. federal law. That is the definition of the weaponization of one's position. And by the way, falling to political pressure because it is the very far left voters of this country who are pressuring Democrats into defying the federal law of this country that not only has President Trump gone all in on, but also I will remind you that Bill Clinton, that Hillary Clinton, that Barack Obama explicitly called for individuals who are avoiding federal immigration law to be deported immediately. It's not brand new U.S. policy. In other news, and this one is a particular good hoot, I must say. The FBI missed a deadline in which it was to deliver a series of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein to Attorney General Pam Bondi today. Now, Pam Bondi has made the case in a letter to Kash Patel that the FBI actually didn't get all the documents in. She orders Kash Patel to investigate it. Kash Patel has been pseudo-silent on this as he's investigating. He's trying to figure out what's going on in the Southern District of New York, and there are all of these ins and outs and who said, what said, he said, he said, she said kind of stuff. Those things all said, we haven't seen the end of this play out yet. I do believe that the Attorney General of the United States is doing her best to release this to the American people, despite the kind of botched despite the botched optics of the binder release through influencers. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that over the weekend. That all said, we'll hit one mail time question really quick, and then we'll get you guys checked out of here for the weekend. So if we can actually get a little bit of mail time up. And please do excuse those who are tuning in for the first time. Those who listen to the show frequently send in a couple of questions. This one is extremely prescient to the current situation. It was sent in before the negotiations today. Do you think that the war between Russia and Ukraine will end during Trump's administration? And do you think Zelensky will honor his promise of stepping down? That's from Mike. Do I think that Zelensky will honor his promise of stepping down as though that is after the war happens? No, I don't. I think that Zelensky might step down after extreme pressure from the Ukrainian parliament. You are seeing what could be a growing number of Ukrainian parliamentarians to shut down the current approach that Zelensky is using on the world stage. It's not producing dividends. Ukraine is going to need help rebuilding after the war is over as it is. And this is quite a situation of biting the hand that feeds you. So I think that Zelensky might end up stepping down. I don't think he's going to be impeached. I find that hard to believe. It didn't really work during the brief window that was attempted via the Biden administration in Israel. I do think that he might step down in disgrace. That might be a thing that happens. Again, that's all conjecture. It's just me answering the question in whole. Do I think that the war will be over during the Trump administration? Yes, absolutely. I do think so. I think it will likely be over in a couple of months. If not a ceasefire within the month, because the Trump administration is now using max leverage tactics to get what it wants. And again, considering that America is the global hegemon, it is the ultimate power in the world. When you throw around all of the weight at once, things tend to happen. So that said, a little announcement just for the end of the show. I am taking over the Daily Signal's top news in 10 which is a morning 10-minute kind of quick bulletin of the headlines news program for the Daily Signal. You can find that stuff over on the Daily Signal's YouTube page, on podcasts, wherever you get that kind of stuff. Really looking forward to carrying on the work that Rob Bluey, that Virginia Allen, that our White House correspondent Elizabeth Mitchell have brought over the last couple of years. Very excited to kickstart that process. That'll start Monday morning. We'll still be doing the show here. This is one of the surprises I'd referenced just a little bit ago in terms of episodes. Some big changes that are coming. A couple more we can't get into just yet, but we're very excited about the show's growth. There are a lot of things we're excited to share with you as things start to pick up speed. Those who are tuning in tonight, we ask, hey, give us a like on the video, subscribe if that's something that you enjoyed tonight. I try not to bludgeon people over the head with like and subscribe, but, you know, it would be rather helpful if instead of seeing NPR's Monday Morning Droll, you got this. Those things all said, have a wonderful weekend. I hope that you find some time to spend with your families. That's really what I'm looking forward to. Pray for those that are involved in the negotiations with Russia and Ukraine. If anything else, just that God's will be done in this situation and that the war would end. And above all, I genuinely hope you find a little bit of time to rest from this insane news cycle. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC out of Indianapolis. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.